talks in Pakistan this past weekend between the US and Iran have failed to bridge the gap over their differences. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome. You're watching Press Perspective for this Monday, April 13th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Dialogue between diplomatic delegations from the US and Iran in Pakistan this past weekend ended with no deal and instead renewed defiance from both sides. For more on this, I have Fabian Kretschmer with German press agency DPA here in the studio. Fabian, it's great to have you back.
Great to be back, yeah.
I also have Professor Choi Hyun-Jin at Kyung Hee University. Live on the line, Professor Choi, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely. We shall start here in the studio. Fabian, let's begin with details that have been disclosed about the talks between the US and Iran over in Pakistan this past weekend.
Yeah, Islamabad was hosting the first direct talks between US and Iranian government officials. So they were talking directly, not mediated through a third party. And that was really a marathon session. The negotiations lasted over 20 hours. And sadly, I have to say there was no deal, there was no agreement reached after the talks have ended. And I'm quoting J.D. Vance, the vice president who represented the US side. He said, "The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the US." And he said that they have not chosen our terms, quote end. And you can see, or that's actually what was said by both sides, that the expectations were unrealistic, were quite demanding. So the US said that Iran didn't accept our terms, and vice versa, Iran didn't want to accept the US terms. I mean, from the US side, and we will talk about that probably much more later, the main issue was the nuclear issue. They wanted a very strong commitment that Iran will not be able to pursue nuclear weapons. But of course, from the Iranian point of view, they wanted to have the possibility to enrich uranium for civilian purposes. But I mean, that's kind of, to work out those details is quite complicated. And yeah, from the Iranian side, they wanted basically that the US would free a lot of frozen assets. That was a big issue, basically economic commitments, the sanctions, they wanted them lifted, etc. And then, of course, the Strait of Hormuz, the big oil shipment route. Iran, from their point of view, they want to rebuild the country by, charging oil tankers. Right now, it's $2 million per shipment, and use that money to rebuild the country. But of course, that is not acceptable for the US side. So you can really see that both sides clashed, and right now we don't have any solution yet.
Right, we do not. But Professor Choi, for the time being though, as Fabian mentioned, the talks lasted over 20 hours. How do you evaluate these efforts to ensure stability in the Middle East?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think this talk in Pakistan brought stability to the region. This talk was very important because they brought the US and Iran for the first time after a long fight. But unfortunately, the talk failed, and it shows the huge gap between the two warring parties. The United States asked for a very strong term, including the removing of all of Iran's highly enriched uranium and the transferring those uranium to the United States, and also fully reopening the Strait of Hormuz. For Donald Trump, these are not just technical issues. They are a sign of American victory, which is so important for his incoming midterm election as well. But for Iran, and these terms are, the Strait of Hormuz and uranium, and they are the last bargaining tools. And giving them up would mean a complete surrender for the Iranian government. And for this reason, Iran chose not to accept American demands. And so now we are seeing a move from diplomacy to coercion and pressure, including some naval blockade by America once again, and also possible military action. So this is not a stable situation, and I think this is very uncertain and the risk phase of the war.
Right, and speaking about pressure, Fabian, Mr. Trump took to his social media platform over the weekend to share his thoughts about the talks in Pakistan. What has he been saying?
Yeah, I think those actually two lengthy posts on Truth Social on his online platform were quite interesting because first they gave insights why the talks, according to Trump, fell through and what he did afterwards. But I will start with why the talks have been unsuccessful. He wrote, Trump, and I'm quoting here, "The meeting went well, most points were agreed to, but the only point that really mattered, nuclear, was not." So according to Trump, that was the main issue why things fell through. And Trump announced in those posts a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. And, you know, you might wonder, okay, why, I mean, does Trump want to block the strait that has been already almost closed for a long time? I think he wants to open the strait. But according to Trump's logic, right now, Iran can decide which ships go through and, you know, they can be charged. And from the US point of view, they say either no ship can go through or all ships can go through, and then they don't need to be charged. And that's why right now he's trying to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, starting Korea evening time or late evening time on Monday. And that has consequences. Right now, the oil prices have been surging. And today, the trading week started by the East Asian stock markets opening relatively low. I mean, it was not like a collapse or whatsoever, but you can see some disappointment by the markets, and so let's see how that will go. Yeah.
Right. In the meantime, Professor Choi, what do you suppose have been the gains and losses for the US amid Mr. Trump's preemptive assault against Iran?
Yes, I think there are some gains of the United States as well. First, the United States has weakened Iran's military capability. It has destroyed some of Iran's key military and economic infrastructure and also reduced Iran's ability to attack Israel in the short term. And secondly, the United States has shown its strong military power. So it can strengthen its deterrence and also send a clear message to both Iran and other countries like Cuba, North Korea, and possibly China. However, there are also very important costs as well. The first, although America is the world's largest oil producing country, even oil prices in America are rapidly rising, which can hurt the American, also global economy and American people. And secondly, there is a risk of larger conflict in the region. So there's a real danger of a further escalation of the war into a regional war, not just including Iran, America, but also other countries like Lebanon and Yemen. So in general, the United States has gained a short-term military advantage, but at the cost of much higher long-term risk.
And staying with that then, Professor Choi, in your view, what about Iran? What has it gained and what has it lost?
Yes, like America, Iran has some gains and loss as well. On the one hand, Iran has managed to survive the initial attack by America and Israel, and it has maintained its core position. And it's not accepted American demands yet, especially on the nuclear issue and also the Strait of Hormuz, and also its ruling elite, especially the Revolutionary Guard. They are still in power. And also, there has been no clear evidence that there is a popular uprising inside Iran. So this allows Iranian elite to keep its bargaining position right now. On the other hand, the costs are serious. Iran has suffered a serious damage to its military and economic infrastructure, and it is also facing stronger economic pressure, especially on its oil exports. So simply speaking, they are harming oneself by closing the Strait of Hormuz, which is very important for its oil exports. So Iran has kept its position, but also at a very high cost.
Right. Fabian, speaking as a German correspondent, what can you tell us about Europe's response to the attempts to advance peace in the Middle East?
Well, I think Europe wants peace and stability. I mean, how the position has shifted. I mean, in the beginning, I could see some euphoria about the war, but mostly among the Iranian diaspora in Europe. I mean, I just spent the last weeks in Europe, and for example, in front of the Iranian embassy in Vienna, I could witness people with Iranian roots celebrating, cheering when actually their country was attacked, and that they were waving also US and even Israel flags, and that goes to show how desperate many people in the diaspora must have been wanting a regime change. But now a regime change is off the table. What has changed? Actually, not that much. And you know, for Europe, the position is that we didn't want the war from the beginning. Actually, we suffer much more from the effects of the war than the US does. And now Trump is asking us to clean up the mess. I mean, because Trump wants Europe to get involved when it comes to like securing free shipping of the Strait of Hormuz, etc. And Europe, I think, rightfully says, look, we didn't start the war, and now you want to get us involved. And there's actually also another aspect, because it's a regional conflict, and one conflict also is the fight between Israel and Hezbollah, one of the proxies by Iran, and you know, Germany and France. On the one hand, they of course support Israel. They want Israel to defend itself, and you know, and those proxies, they have been attacking Israel for quite a long time. But they're also very concerned about the excessive use of force that has been going on recently. That you know, the attacks that Israel is doing against Lebanon. I mean, there was really some horrible scenes that came out of those attacks, and so to make it short, it is really getting messy, and Europe is very concerned that this conflict might get even might spread even further. So Europe wants peace, I think, but how to achieve that right now is quite difficult. Yeah.
Right, indeed. And speaking about Israel and Lebanon, the officials from the two sides, Professor Choi, are slated to sit down at the U.S. State Department this week, I believe Tuesday, for talks. Ahead of this meeting, though, Professor Choi, their top diplomats to the U.S. spoke on the phone. Could you touch upon the importance of these interactions for us?
Yes, there has been some report on this diplomatic meeting between Israel and Lebanon. So I think these kind of interactions are important, but unfortunately, you know, we should not expect too much. So anyway, in this kind of crisis, even a small diplomatic contacts are precious because they can anyway help prevent further escalation. Okay, but however, we must remember there's a major structural problem. That is, the Lebanese government and Hezbollah are not the same. So in other words, even if Lebanon agrees in talk and they make some agreement with Israel, it does not mean Hezbollah will follow. So in fact, Hezbollah is more closely linked to Iran than to the Lebanese government. In reality, there has been some conflict and rivalry between the Lebanese government and Hezbollah. But Hezbollah has maintained a very close cooperation and cooperative relationship with the Iranian government. So the real key issue is not Lebanon, but Iran. So unless Iran changes its policy, it'll be very hard to change the behavior of Hezbollah. So that's why it is difficult to expect a major breakthrough from this talk between Israel and the Lebanese government. So this is more about managing the situation or managing the crisis, not solving the real problem.
Right. And against those mounting tensions then, Fabian, CNN, it had an exclusive report about China set to ship arms to Iran. Could you tell us a bit more about this exclusive coverage by CNN?
Yeah, that was really a bombshell scoop. So CNN reported that China is allegedly preparing to send air defense missiles to Iran, and China so far has rejected that claim. They say they denied those accusations, but of course we cannot verify them. But from my understanding, the U.S. intelligence, I mean, those reports, at least in recent years, have more often turned out to be true than not. And at least I would say, with my knowledge about China, I mean, China basically doesn't hold any formal alliances with countries. That is important to know. So they actually don't care ideologically much whether, you know, the regime right now in Tehran is in power or not, as long as oil is shipping and as long both align with their national interests. So for China, I think their own national interests come first, and everything else doesn't matter that much. But since if it would be true that China is indeed preparing those air defense missiles, I think they would be of a lot of use, because they could learn in real experience situation how they would perform in combat. I mean, basically also getting tested against the US military. I mean, both countries are rivals, US and China. They are the two hegemonial powers. They will decide who's basically the hegemon in the next 50, 60 years. And so I think it could be true. And what China is basically doing is not too different than what it does with the war in Ukraine. They are neutral in their own propaganda, I would say, but they send dual-use products to Russia. So they are siding with one side, but not too much. It's a fine line that they walk, but they are not neutral in my understanding. So I would not be totally surprised if this report turns out to be true, actually.
Right. Professor Choi, speaking as a scholar, what do you suppose would be the broader implications of such a shipment of arms from Beijing to Tehran amid Tehran's conflict with Washington?
Oh, yes, as Fabian just said, there's been some media report about China is transferring some air defense system to Iran through third parties. If it is true, even if it is true, it is still too early to make a clear prediction about its geopolitical consequence. But however, one important point is that the war between great powers, such as US and China, do not start as direct conflict between the two countries. Think about the example of a Peloponnesian War between the ancient Athens and Sparta. And this war began from a civil war in a small city-state called Epidamnus. And the World War I also started from a regional tension in the Balkan, especially some independence movement by the Serbian people. And also the war in the Korean Peninsula, between US and China started as a North Korean invasion of South Korea. So in that sense, this situation in Iran and also possible transfer of weapons from China to Iran does not necessarily mean a direct US-China conflict, but it does show some possibility. So in other words, the Iranian war between Israel, America, and Iran, and this war could become a pathway through which the competition between US and China may expand. And for this reason, I think we should watch this development and possible provision of a real weapon from China to Iran very carefully.
Right, I'm sure quite a number of people will be keeping their eyes on that possibility. I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Professor Choi, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
And Fabian here in the studio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, on that note, we end Monday's edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. Do join us again, same time tomorrow.